Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, "Real estate cannot be lost or stolen, nor can it be carried away. Purchased with common sense, paid for in full, and managed with reasonable care, it's about the safest investment in the world." And real estate is what we do. This is the Realtors Radio Network. There's no sense in overcomplicating real estate. And if you're a first-time home buyer, an investor, or a real estate agent, you're about to get useful, practical, and smart advice on every facet of real estate. Welcome to the Realtors Radio Network. Now your hosts, Santos Garcia, Marcos Suarez, and Dawn McCullough.
Welcome to today's episode of Realtors Radio Network. I'm here along with our co-hosts, Santos Garcia, Dawn McCullough, and myself. We are going to be discussing the buyer's closing costs. We're going to have a general idea, give you a general idea, because we do get asked, right? Just about everybody asks us.
We get asked this a lot, and I think a partnership between the realtor and the lender, that should be discussed at length so that buyers know exactly what they're, what they can expect.
Yeah, what's included.
Mm-hmm. So you want to walk us through a general, as much as you can. We want to cover enough so that people get an idea as to what's, what it entails, what's covered, what would they have to look forward to as they get closer to the closing day, maybe even before. Like what does a loan officer actually?
So we'll talk about upfront closing costs and then closing costs that you pay at closing.
Perfect.
So just walking you through when you get an offer accepted, right? You in our case, in New Jersey, you go into attorney review. When you get out of attorney review, you would typically have a good faith deposit due, which is a portion of your down payment. So that would be probably first things first, or almost around the same time as you're going to start doing your inspections. Okay? I get this question asked a lot. Does the home inspector get paid at closing? And the answer to that is no. The home inspector gets paid up front when they complete the inspection. They get paid for the job that they do, whether you decide to buy the house or not.
How about the appraiser?
The appraiser as well. Appraiser gets paid up front, so your lender will order an appraisal through an appraisal management company who will then schedule through an appraiser, and they get paid up front as well. They get paid before they go out. So those two things, again, they're non-refundable once the job is done, so to speak, and those get paid up front. In terms of inspections, so most properties you're going to have your home inspection, which is kind of the, we often joke around like it's like taking your home to the doctor, right, for a checkup. So you have sort of your general home inspector, and then depending on what they recommend or even what your comfort level is, you can take it a bit further. So your general home inspector would be first. They typically include a radon test as well as a wood-destroying insects or termite inspection. And then you may want to take a little bit further and do a tank scan where they're looking for underground oil tanks or any metal objects underneath the ground. That could also be abandoned septic tanks as well. And then some people take it even further depending on if it's applicable, whether they do a chimney inspection, whether it's a level 1 or level 2 chimney inspection, and a sewer scope. We're starting to see that a lot now in our business, where they look through the lines, make sure that, especially if it's a, how can I say, like a clay lining, is it intact? Is it in good shape? Are there tree roots or any blockages that would prevent a good flow of water or whatever else is going into the sewer.
And just to be clear, these are all things before you get to the closing table. These are all things, not necessarily the closing costs, but things involved in the transaction, just so that we're clear.
Right. And these would be upfront costs for these inspectors to go out. And these are all different types of inspectors. Our recommendation is always to start with the general home inspection, making sure that you're still feeling comfortable about the house. You didn't find anything alarming structurally or anything like that. And after, you find out that it is structurally sound and in good shape, you might want to, depending on the inspector's recommendations, evaluate something further. So that would be first, right? The inspections, you have your good faith deposit, and then you have your inspection fees, which would get paid. And then we're going to go into what most people talk about, the actual closing costs. So these would be costs associated with purchasing a home and costs associated with taking a loan. When you do apply for a mortgage, you would get a loan estimate once you have a solidified contract and the property that you're going to be purchasing. You would get a loan estimate, which would include a breakdown of everything that could be associated with purchasing your home. There's a little bit of a difference on the type of property you're purchasing. So, for example, if you're purchasing a condo or a property that has a homeowners association, so an HOA, you'll see additional fees which may include but not limited to their capital reserve, upfront maintenance fees, an application fee to join the membership. And that could be, as a general rule of thumb, we usually say about 3.5 times the maintenance fee. Would you say that's about
right.
average?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Again, don't quote me on that, but just a general rule of thumb, just to have a number in your mind, we usually say about 3.5% of the HOA, or 3.5 times the HOA fee. The second thing also, which would be maybe sort of out of the ordinary, but we see it, is sometimes when we have foreclosures or REO assets, so real estate owned, bank owned homes, it's typical here in New Jersey for the seller to pay the realty transfer tax, but we do see sometimes on some bank owned homes where the buyer takes on that fee. So that's going to be important to know. If you're buying a bank-owned home, that might be an additional cost that you incur. So let's get down into the fees that are typically associated with your loan that you would be paying at closing. So every lender and every bank operates slightly differently. So I'm just going to throw some things out there that may or may not be applicable to you. First would be an application fee, which is part of the closing costs that would be due at closing, but you'll have your application fee. Some lenders charge a commitment fee. Sometimes that fee is broken up a little bit differently from lender to lender, so just important to know. You'll have your deposit, which might be shown on your loan estimate, may or may not be, but at some point, once you get closer to closing, it would show up on the closing disclosure. And then you have your loan charges. So in addition to your application fee, you might have discount points. This is something that I think people are slightly confused about. What are discount points? And what does it do for you? So discount points are basically an upfront fee to the lender, almost like a prepaid interest to buy down the rate. Now, a discount point could be 1%. It doesn't have to be in whole percentages. It could be 1.25%, 1.5%, 2%. There are obviously guidelines with limits of what the maximum you can be charged for discount points, loan specific. But let's say that a discount point is 1%. That 1% is 1% of your loan amount. That does not mean that it's going to buy down an interest rate 1%, right? It could be an eighth or a quarter. But let's say that your loan amount is $100,000. If it's 1%, then it's 1% of $100,000. If it were 2%, it would be 2% of $100,000, and so on.
And so when people, just to be clear, when people saying, they're charging a point, doesn't mean that they're lowering their interest rate by 1 full percent.
Right.
It could be a point, could be an eighth, or it could be
or a quarter. Right? Something like that. And I'm not going to quote that specific to lenders or anything like that, but that's the meaning of it. Like you mentioned,
right.
1 point equals 1% of the loan amount. It's typical now to see points being charged at closing just because of everything going on with interest rates. You see it a lot right now, people paying points, and it's a normal part of the process. The second thing I'll talk about, and this is probably one of the largest fees of your closing, is title insurance. So a lot of people ask, is this required? Do I need it? Yes, it's required. And I also would say, just in my opinion, obviously the deed is important, right? The seller signing over the deed to the buyer. But I just think, for me, this is one of the most important parts of the entire transaction. Would you guys agree?
I agree.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read this to you, just the known definition of title insurance, and then kind of break it down. So it says title insurance is a unique form of insurance. It provides coverage for future claims or future losses due to title defects which are created by past events. So, so let's just say that we are closing on a property today.
Santos used to own it.
Santos used to own the property. Marcos is going to buy Santos's property. Marcos is going to have a title search done, and the title officers are going to do a search, look through county records and things like that, and they're going to look for skeletons in Santos's closet and see what kind of liens or anything like that might be against the property, to make sure that Marcos does not inherit those liens as of today, the closing date, let's say, of his property, right? So what are some of these liens that might be? Well, they could be mortgages, right? They could be tax liens of some sort, whether they're federal tax liens or municipal tax liens.
Sewer liens.
Mechanics liens. Anything like that. Child support judgments, spousal support judgments, things that attach to a property. So some people say, well, if that belonged to Santos, right? And now I own the property and he doesn't own the property anymore, why do I have to worry about that? Well, some liens attach physically to a property in addition to a person, or maybe just the property, right?
Right.
So
you want to make sure you get the house free and clear, as they say, right?
Of course, right? So while it might seem like an expensive one-time fee, this is for your protection. And a lot of people don't realize just how important it is until they go to actually sell the home that they've purchased. Because when a new buyer does their title search and they might find some old judgments or liens, as long as you have that title policy in hand, you're good. You're covered. That's going to kick in if there were any errors where maybe something didn't get paid off. You're protected. So would you guys, say...
I don't want to inherit somebody else's, liens or debts. And, of course, it's essential, I would say, to the transaction.
Definitely.
And the cost of title insurance is based off of the purchase price of the property. Yep. So to give you an example, I have a property here. Sale price is $575,000, and the title charges were, let's see here. Am I reading this right? They were about $3,500. for this particular title company.
Okay.
And that's part of your closing costs. There's two fees that are the largest part of your closing costs, one being the title insurance fee or cost, and the second being your escrows. Escrows are something that I think are largely misunderstood, so we're going to kind of break it down a little bit.
Sure.
And if you guys have any common questions that you get asked, feel free to.
Well, the most common question is, what is an escrow?
Exactly. I was just
Okay.
about to ask
Well, an escrow account, right? So it's an account that is kind of set aside to be used for a specific purpose. So in this particular case, when we talk about tax escrows, depending on your loan type, so we're going to talk about a loan, let's say, where you're going to include your taxes into your mortgage monthly payment, which is broken down to principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Okay, so every month in your loan or in your mortgage payment, you would be paying 1/12 of your taxes. So we're going to use $12,000 taxes just to make it easy.
Sure.
If you have a property that the taxes are $12,000, then $1,000 per month is going into your mortgage payment towards the property taxes. Okay, the same thing will be for insurance. So we'll use $1,200 for insurance. If your insurance is $1,200 for the year, you will pay $100 per month, 1/12, into that escrow account, separate escrow accounts. Okay. So I just want to touch upon home insurance because it's something that's maybe largely misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
Home insurance is paid up front. So you're always paying a year in advance. Okay. It's kind of falls under the cover your asset or protect your asset, right? So
I thought you were going to cut that short for me.
no, I'm not going to cut it short. But it's always part of a CYA, you know. Basically, you're paying it a year up front in full at closing, or depending on what your lender requires, if they want it to be paid, you know, a week or two prior and you have the paid receipt, or you pay it at closing or it gets invoiced at closing. So let's say it's $1,200 for your homeowner's insurance. So you're going to pay $1,200 as part of, you know, whether you paid it right before closing or at the closing. And then every month in your mortgage payment, you would pay 1/12 or $100 a month towards the next year's renewal. So when that renewal comes in, your lender gets the bill and they renew that insurance for you. So does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So the
Yes.
home insurance or hazard insurance, the premium is paid up front in full for 1 year, and you're paying every month in your mortgage payment so that at the end of the first year, you have the money in that escrow account that the lender is managing to pay for the renewal. The same thing will be for the taxes. So in New Jersey, we pay taxes quarterly. So you'll get a quarterly bill. It'll go to your lender, and they will disperse to pay the taxes quarterly. So when you're paying in your monthly mortgage payment that $1,000 per month, they have that money sitting aside at closing, or I'm sorry, in their escrow account, so that when they get that tax bill, they can pay that next quarter's taxes for you.
Right.
Now, when you look at escrows and what is in your closing costs, it's going to be one of your largest parts of your closing costs. So you'll want to figure up to 5 months of taxes in escrow in your closing costs. And you might say, well, why would I pay 5 months? So typically, because the title insurance company is guaranteeing, right, this policy, they want to make sure that in the mix of you closing and sometimes the mortgage is transferring servicing or the loan is sold or something like that, and maybe things aren't settled or in place yet, they want to make sure that they have the money for that next quarter's taxes so that no tax lien is incurred on that property. So there we have our 3 months. And then in addition, the lender is going to be setting up an escrow account for 2 months, right? So don't forget, when you are closing, let's say we close today. Today is, let's say mid-month. You're not making a mortgage payment in that month, and you have a grace period the following month. So we're in October, right? The first mortgage payment is going to be made in December. We're going to start that escrow account with 2 months of taxes to cover for those 2 months that we're not making payments, right?
Okay.
So at the end of the first year, we will have had 12 between the 2 months of the escrow and then every month in the mortgage payment going into that escrow account. There would be enough funds to cover when the lender is getting billed for the quarterly taxes and insurance.
Perfect.
In addition to that, once a year, your lender will do an annual review to see how your escrow account, how healthy it is or not.
Mm-hmm.
So is it doing well? You have enough in your escrow to cover the monthly or the quarterly, let's say, taxes or yearly insurance, or is it short? Well, reasons why it could be short is if your taxes increased or your homeowner's insurance increased. If it's short, you'll get the option to either make a one-time payment to make that account healthy again, or they may give you an option to increase your payment over X amount of time to get that escrow back up to where it needs to be. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So we have that. So we have our title insurance. We have our escrows. We talked about discount points. So we'll also have, so like I mentioned, the 2 months escrow for the taxes, you'll also have that for the homeowner's insurance as well. Okay. Other things in terms of taxes, let's say, or could be sewer fees or things like that, will be prorations. So basically, there might be prorated fees for things that the seller of the property may have paid in advance. So the way that taxes work here, without trying to confuse you guys, let's say that taxes are due November 1st, right? When you pay those taxes for November 1st, that is actually covering the taxes for October, November, and December. So if a seller pays their taxes early, if they pay them now, or let's say that they didn't pay them and we close right now, we would owe them for the rest of the days that are left in that quarter for what was paid. Does that make sense? So if they paid November 1st and let's say we closed November 2nd, we would owe them for the remaining days left in November and the remaining days left in December.
Right.
Okay.
So those could be some prorations. The same thing could be for a sewer bill that may be paid in advance. I know in the town that I live in, the sewer bill is paid twice a year, I think. I hope.
And in some towns, the taxes include...
right, they may include the sewer and you're not paying separately for
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Yep, so you'll have that. Let's go on to some other fees. So I talked about title. You'll also have, or at least here we have legal fees if you have an attorney representing you.
Right.
In most cases, that's paid at closing. Sometimes you might pay a retainer up front, where that gets deducted from the entire fee. Every attorney is, has their own way of doing business. So you might want to ask them that, so that you know what you're getting into. We also have a survey, right? We recommend that you always get a survey. It's important to know where the property lines are. You have an additional option to get the stakes put in or the property markers at the corners. It's not necessarily, I'm not going to make a recommendation on that one way or another, but it's not something that you need to do. But the survey, while it's not required we definitely recommend getting that done. So just so you know where the property lines are, if anybody's property is over on your line or any of your property is over on somebody else's.
In case you want to put up a fence, you know where the line is.
Yep. So this comes
Fences
up a lot.
make good neighbors. So
they do. And I'll tell you, I can't tell you how many times somebody has declined to get a survey. Most of it just comes down to expense, right? So if it's $800 or so or whatever it is, and obviously it depends on the size of the property, but let's just say it's $800. A lot of people won't see the value in it, you know, so they don't want to spend the money on it, and it's not required. So there's that. And then they call me, you know, 2 weeks after closing to say, hey, can you send me a copy of my survey? Because we're going to get this beautiful white vinyl fence installed. And then I have to remind them that
they declined.
That they declined to get a survey. But, you know, it's
And in a lot of cases, I'm sorry to interrupt, but in a lot of cases, it's actually less expensive for you to get it done at closing than it is if you try and do it after the fact.
Or easier. So
and easier,
I would
yes.
say, you know, a couple of things. Surveyors want to make sure they're going to get paid, right?
Of course.
And so when they're in a real estate transaction, they know the importance of getting it done and the urgency, let's say, of getting it done. And they're going to prioritize those over someone who just randomly wants to get a survey.
Right.
So highly recommend it. It kind of, for me, is mind-boggling. In addition to inspections, that when you're spending several hundred thousand dollars, or sometimes millions, on a home, why wouldn't you want to spend, you know, a few $100s or a few $1,000s here and there to protect your asset and make sure that what you're getting into or you're getting into what you think you're getting into, and just kind of have that satisfaction or verification. We get a lot of pushback on that, I feel like, a little bit on inspections and surveys. It doesn't matter whether you're buying a new construction home. You should still get, builders will maybe throw some rotten tomatoes at us for this one, but you should still get an inspection done. I actually had an inspection done on a new construction that my client insisted that, I remember him saying, you're spending my money. And I said, just get it done. And it turns out that they did not have the furnace connected properly. So we closed in the middle of the summer. He wouldn't have found out to the winter, and it would have been on him. It would have been his issue to deal with.
For a home inspection.
Yes.
Exactly.
But
so
for a survey, in particular, you know, it's not just for, let me know where the fence is, or let me know, you know, where this property ends or starts. Sometimes there are, you know, easements. There are things running through the property that you want to make sure they are or they aren't on your property.
Sure. So I'll tell you guys a story. A client of mine got a survey for his property purchase. Everything is fine. About 2 years later, after he purchases the property, he gets a certified letter from the town letting him know that some of his fence and his shed, it was a quite elaborate shed, was on an easement that was between him and the property behind him. And they basically let him know the date and time that his property, so to speak, was going to be removed from that easement area so they can replace utility drain or pipe or something like that. And so he remembers that he got a survey and that he doesn't ever recall purchasing a property with an easement or that being part of the property. And so it was almost like down to the hour where people were going to be going there and removing his fence and his landscaping and his shed because they were saying that it was on the property. And he came across his survey and he went to them and showed them. And it turns out that the town was wrong and that because of his survey, he was able to show them that they were wrong and that this utility line or easement or whatever it was on the other property. And I bring that up because what do you think would have happened if they removed all of that and then they found out it was a mistake? It's not so likely that they would have just gone and put everything back so pretty and back the way it was. It would have maybe just been too late.
Yeah, they would have destroyed the shed, and that's it.
That's
right.
it. Yeah.
So with that example alone, and I share that to clients all the time because we don't think about these things, right? These are not common occurrences, but how would you feel if you didn't end up having that survey and now you're dealing with somebody ripping up your yard and things like that? And so I can't stress enough the importance of getting that survey. That is just going to end up being part of your closing costs, but it's well worth it. A couple of other things that come up, prepaid interest. So whatever month you close in, however many days left in the month, your lender will charge you prepaid interest just for that month. That's why we see so many closings where everybody's rushing to close at the end of the month, so they don't have that prepaid interest. It's not that you're overpaying or anything like that, whether you pay it now or at the end of your loan. But it's just it is an added fee that's in there. Anything else that you guys, can think of?
I think you covered all the bases as far as general questions that people have.
So we also have one other thing, which would be recording fees for your deed and your mortgage with the county,
which are minimal.
Might be $450 or something like that. So you can see how these things can add up, right? If your taxes are $12,000 and we say up to 5 months tax escrow being so taxes $12,000 broken down to $1,000 a month, that can be $5,000 right there. If your title is $3,500, now we're at $8,500. Let's say your lender has application fees or whatever other fees of $1,500, we're up to $10,000. Your attorney's fee may be $1,500, so we're at $11,500. Survey fee $800, so now we're at $12,300. And then any discount points. So what I would say is that a general rule of thumb, we used to say that closing costs could be somewhere around 3% of your purchase price. And that still would remain true, but just in addition to, you might add in your discount points. So depending on where you are with your lender, if you're paying 1 point or 1% of the loan, or maybe even 2 points, just want to add that in or factor that in for budgeting purposes.
Right. And attorneys' fees do vary.
Yeah,
they do. So again, if you in our area, with attorneys' fees being generally a flat fee for a real estate attorney, there are some attorneys that might charge hourly, so you'll want to find out about that.
Yeah. Asking for a friend, is there any happy hour fees for the happy hour after the closing? It's for a friend of mine.
Well, your realtor will not. No, well, celebrating is a must. Homeownership, we strongly believe in home ownership being what makes people wealthy, or even just in a different level of those versus people who don't own property. We still believe in the power of home ownership, and for people that are thinking, why should I own a home or why should I buy a home? There's something to it, right? There's still a pride part of it of it's still part of the American dream.
Absolutely. Well, they say homeowners have 40 times the wealth of a renter. So, even if it's just for that, for this peace of mind that somewhere down the line, you're going to be okay because you own the property that you're in. It's we always stress the importance of home ownership.
Sure.
So thank you for covering the bases on closing costs and a few other things you touched on. So we thank you for that. Sure. Thanks for putting on your lender hat on and realtor hat.
There's some other things that also are included, but
call us if you have questions, of course.
Yes.
And we'll be glad to address
them on the show. Send us a message. Reach out on Instagram.
Absolutely. So thank you for watching Realtors Radio Network, and we'll see you next time.
This is Realtors Radio Network signing off.
Keep an ear out for the next episode of the Realtors Radio Network, where Santos Garcia, Marcos Suarez, and Dawn McCullough share their wealth of real estate knowledge. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, review, and share. Find us on social media at Realtors Radio Network. See you next time on the Realtors Radio Network.